Well, hello again. I'm Carol Fote, and today I'm going to be interviewing Michael Bingham. Michael is a teaching artist. So we're going to start out, Michael, with you telling us a little bit about the beginning, your career as it unfolded over the years.
Thanks, Carol. I appreciate you having me on your show. I've watched several, and they're really fun to get to know our neighbors around the community. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Um, I've been a professional artist for about 20 years now. My background is so varied. I spent 12 years as an artist for Hallmark Cards in Kansas City and did about 1,000 products for Hallmark, and almost no two of them look like the same artist did them. I've worked painting and selling in galleries in Park City and Jackson Hole and Seattle, and uh, and I've taught high school art for 10 years. So I just make the rounds. We went to art school in Los Angeles in California, actually in Pasadena, and went from there to Kansas City. I grew up in Idaho, and we're just trying to make sure we don't miss out on anything. I think my wife says I have a fear of missing out, so we try everything.
So, what actually did bring you to the Valley? Was it your job, or what brought you here?
Yeah, actually, it was in a way, it was our parents. In Kansas City, after 12 years at Hallmark, some big changes needed to be made there. We had a huge art studio, 400 artists. And because of the internet and some other things, business changed, and 300 of the 400 artists were laid off or let go. And so we found ourselves needing to start over. It was a little scary. We have 7 children. We have a big family, and I was pretty secure in that job as an illustrator and designer at Hallmark. And we had to start over. My parents at the time lived in Ogden area, and my wife's parents lived and still live in Pocatello. And we put our finger on Cache Valley because it's right in the middle, and thought, let's get our kids closer to their grandparents. And and so we moved to Cache Valley because of where it was. And it was a good move. We found out when we got here there's a tremendous number of really well-known artists living in this valley. There's a lot of artists here, and we found that group to be very welcoming, and we've just loved it here.
So, I want to talk a little bit right now about Jump the Moon. What was that about, or what is that about, and where do you hope it's heading? Plus, I do want to know, how did you come up with that name?
Wow, those are good questions. I'm glad you asked about that. Jump the Moon, if people haven't seen it, for 4.5 years, we had a location right on Main Street near the dollar store, a big purple building with a moon painted on it. And it's an art studio for people with disabilities. And that's probably the only time in this conversation that I'll use that word, disabilities. I prefer to think of those challenges as diverse abilities, a positive, not a negative. And I grew up myself with several disabilities in the form of learning disabilities, but I hated it when people used that word because I never felt like I was less than everybody else, or that I was, missing something that everybody else had. I don't think the same way. I see the world differently. I just have a diverse ability myself. So as I started teaching high school, I went into that to try to find the students who might be struggling in school, trying to find their place, trying to fit in, and trying to find out what they can do to contribute, um, and be able to not feel like they're stupid. I think that was the result of my own education. Was I came out of it feeling like I must just be a stupid person. I just don't get it like everybody else does. Anyway, I started teaching high school, and one of the first challenges or things that I hadn't really anticipated was that many students in my classes had even severe challenges in life. And we had all kinds of special needs students. And I immediately kind of fell in love with them and trying to find a way that they could make art and participate and level the playing field so that they could do what everybody else was doing. And we started doing that. My students started helping, and we were having a really enjoyable time doing that. But there was a couple challenges. One of them was the amount of space that we had. My art room, I taught at Mountain Crest for 8 years, and the art room is nice, but I think it was originally designed for about 24 students, and we often had 40 in my class. And by the time you bring in that a couple of those individuals are using wheelchairs and have peer tutors with them, we were really packed in there, and it was the space was a challenge. The other challenge was each class is only an hour long, and so if I get around 40 kids, I get 1 or 2 minutes a piece with them. The frustration of not having enough time and not having an adequate space, I began to dream of a studio that was bigger, where we could paint on the floor with a wheelchair. We could invent adaptive equipment that was bigger and could be used and in a bigger space. And so the Jump the Moon Studio grew out of that. It's a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to bring joy and happiness and fulfillment through the arts to people that often are kind of overlooked or not considered to maybe have the same ability that everybody else might have.
Michael told me when I first talked to him that he could even make me feel like I was an artist. And I'll tell you what, if you can do that, you are amazing.
We can do that. We need a chance to do that. What we do is we revert back to your inner 4-year-old. If you can still remember how creative you were then, and mostly how you didn't worry about what other people were going to think about your art, you just made art because it was fun. You just created things because it was enjoyable. And unfortunately, people give that up. They start worrying about, boy, I wonder if people are going to like this. I wonder if I'm going to be embarrassed. And kids don't have that, and
Yeah,
they just create and make and have fun. In
sure.
fact, I didn't answer part of your question, and it has to do with when I was a kid. Um, I heard a nursery rhyme where a cow jumped over a moon, and I remember being maybe 5 or 6 years old and just thinking about that, just trying to visualize a cow jumping over the moon. We lived at the time in Sugar City, Idaho, and there were cows all around, and I knew they could barely jump a ditch. And so I began to solve this problem in my mind of how to get a cow over the moon. And and I got the idea that the cow would need a jetpack. And if the cow had a jetpack, then no problem, then it could fly over the moon. And at our studio, we make assistive devices, in a way, jetpacks. And it might be one of our 3 wheelchairs that are painting machines. It might be a pendulum that uses gravity to help somebody who doesn't have physical ability to apply the paint. But we make jetpacks pretty much in a figurative way, figurative, symbolic way. So that's why it's called Jump the Moon Studio. And that rocket cow, I actually built that sculpture, a life-size cow with a jetpack, And the jetpack was made out of things, a lot of it was things you'd find on a dairy, uh, old milking machine parts and stuff. But that sculpture was in front of Rose Wagner Center and Abravanel Hall for about 3.5 years in Salt Lake City.
So, Michael, you talk about the objects that you use with your artists as being their jetpacks. I think you're a jetpack
I've never thought about that, but
because of how you help people and how you bring out their artistic abilities that they don't even know that they have. You're a jetpack.
wow, if you had to be an object, that'd be a cool one to be.
I understand that you hang out at DI a lot. Why do you do that?
I love DI. There's so many random things there. If I go there, and I almost always go there with some idea of a problem that I'm trying to solve, and actually a lot of problems that I'm trying to solve, kind of circle around. I have ADHD pretty bad, and or pretty good, depending on how you look at it. Um, but there's a lot of ideas constantly turning in my head. And when I go to a place like DI or I stop at garage sales and just look at random things, often I find some object that helps me solve uh, a problem of trying to find a way for an individual to be able to make art. And it's just one of those places where I find unexpected things that eventually turn out to be really useful. We unfortunately, our building on Main Street was sold and we had to move out, so we're homeless. And I have a lot of stuff and it's in storage, and I've stopped accumulating. In fact, I've been trying to thin it down.
What is your vision now for the future for Jump the Moon? How are you getting funded? How are you able to keep going?
Yeah, there's a couple questions there. I have a wonderful advisory council. I have a board of directors that are part of our nonprofit. And I have been out there searching. There are some options that are just within the last couple days looking like we may have some options coming up. If somebody wants to follow us and see where we're at and what we're doing, jumpthemoon.org is our website, and we put things on there when we have news to share. I started dreaming of this thing probably 9 years ago and trying to make it happen. We've actually been a nonprofit for 4.5. If it were not for the generosity and kindness of other people, this would not have happened. There's a foundation in Salt Lake called the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Foundation. They do so much around the state to keep the arts alive in schools, and they help us with our payroll. There have been individual anonymous donors that have been very generous with helping us keep going. It's always a challenge, though.
So, Michael, the year 2020 was not a good year for a whole lot of reasons. We had COVID, and you lost your art studio, and you also had a very bad accident. Tell us about what happened there and how are you healing?
See, I look back, I this is probably part of why I'm different, I think. I look back on all the stuff that has happened over the past 2 years, actually, and and I see some of the greatest blessings of my life. Uh, some of the most painful, difficult, the accident you referred to in this room that I'm in now. There's a very high vaulted ceiling. At the highest point is about 20 feet up, and I was painting our ceiling, and I fell. The ladder came out from under me, and I broke the fall with my head and fractured my skull and had a brain bleed. I broke my neck in 7 places, and I really busted it up. I broke all my ribs on one side and my knee, and my face, and it was bad. But I'm truly blessed that I've been given a second chance. I came about as close as you can possibly come to being paralyzed the rest of my life. And there were some miracles that happened that made it so I can move. I don't have a lot of flexibility, but that's okay. I'll take it. I'm alive. If I was going to lose what I learned from it, and what I learned was what it's like to have such a severe challenge, a disability that somebody else has to take care of everything for you. You're completely dependent on a machine to breathe for you and people to take care of everything. And it's very humbling. And but it gave me really wonderful insight into what people go through and live with every day. And I know better now how I can serve them because I got to be in their shoes for a little while.
You also mentioned to me that you have to be careful what you pray for.
Yes, it's true.
And
For when I started trying to do this studio for people with diverse abilities, my prayers would be, Heavenly Father, help me understand people with disabilities on a much higher level. I didn't ever stop to think, how's that prayer supposed to get answered? How's that going to work out? But it got answered perfectly. I tend to not look at things in a negative way uh, ever, really. I love to find the positive, even when there's challenges. Like losing our building is also giving us an opportunity to kind of regroup and rethink and do it better.
you've you've just kind of opened a window for me, and I'm sure for all of us in that when we try, sometimes we put limits on people that don't look like they can do something, you
Yeah.
know, and but you've let us see that even blind people can do art. Anybody can do art. And, there, if we just take the time and open up our minds, there's so much to discover. So I'd like to know, what do you want the community to know about what you do, how you do it, and who you do it with, and how can the community help?
Well, first of all, I love the way you phrased that. I hadn't thought of it exactly that way, and I love the idea of that window being opened and seeing possibilities, seeing the potential of individuals, and that's what we do. We go right to work, and I have a wonderful assistant in the studio named Kenzo, who is really good at this too. And we go right to work trying to find what somebody can do. We try to find a strength. Let me kind of give or share something that has been really useful to me. And I'm not even sure why, but from the very beginning, when I started working with uh, students at the high school that had really severe challenges, um, my first thought is, if that was me, if I was inside of that body and that was me, and I could only move my eyes and I couldn't verbally communicate, what would I wish somebody would do for me? Or how would I like people to talk to me? And I assume everybody that I work with understands completely what's going on and what's being said. And so I never speak in negative terms about what they can't do. I always am very optimistic about we're going to find what you can do. Um, and just imagining the way I would like to be talked to, not in a like a baby voice or not in a demeaning way at all, but just like you talk to another friend or member of your family. Um, and really wouldn't want to be treated, I wouldn't want to be treated any differently because my body had a lot of challenges. So um, that's kind of a simple thing I think maybe people could do more is just imagine it's you and how would you like people to interact and to be a part of your life. I love this program that you're doing because as I watch the different segments, I meet some of the neighbors and I really hope that I run into them, at the grocery store or somewhere and can talk to them about their experiences and what they're doing in their life. If anybody would like to know more about what we do at Jump the Moon and or could be helpful in helping us to find a new location and get into a new location and accomplish some other goals that we're setting. I would love it if people contacted me. Uh, they can find us on jumpthemoon.org. I appreciate the time you took to talk to me today.
I just thank you very much. And it's really been a pleasure to get to know you, even if it's on Zoom. One of these days, I'm going to meet you out on the street and I'm going to say, hey, Michael.
I hope so.